Welcome back to the Peanut Gallery. For our last subject of the night, we're going to talk the most valuable player so far in the NBA season. There are 3.5 weeks left. Who's your MVP so far? Who's your dark horse? And who's under the radar? Austin, let's hear who's your MVP so far.
My MVP is Kevin Durant. What he's done this year, leading the Thunder to the #1 spot in the West right now. I think they'll make a deep playoff run, and it's because of Kevin Durant. He gets 27.5 points a game, 3.5 assists. So that's okay though, because his scoring abilities, and he gets 8.2 rebounds. So that gets them in transition. So while he may not have that many assists, he may be that pass that gets that assist. So, and he's got that clutch gene that you have to have if you want to be an MVP. You've got to be able to hit those clutch shots deep in late games, because when it comes playoff time, you're going to face some good teams, and there are a lot of times when somebody's going to have to hit a shot.
I think another thing that really helps Kevin Durant is the Thunder's record in the West. They're leading the West right now. Most would consider the Thunder the best team in the NBA, so that definitely helps him, especially him being not only the best player on the team, as most would consider with Russell Westbrook, but probably the leader on the team.
If your team is not winning, it's going to be really hard to be an MVP. There's just people aren't going to know about you if your team's not winning unless you are just having a blowout season.
Who's your favorite for right now?
All right, my favorite is LeBron James. The Thunder and the Heat have very similar records, both near the top of their conference, with Miami second and OKC first in the West. All right, so LeBron James' stats are just this much better than Kevin Durant's. He's scoring comparable in points, 26.5, comparable in rebounds, 8 rebounds per game, but he has 6.5 assists, significantly more. So I like LeBron James for the simple fact that he has more assists per game than Kevin Durant. Kevin Durant's supposed to be a scorer, but you know, you can happen into 3 assists per game. And I feel like out of Kevin Durant, I want to see around 5 assists per game by Kevin Durant before I would push him past LeBron James.
Okay, who's your dark horse?
My dark horse, and although he is leading the NBA in points right now, is Kobe Bryant. A lot of people were writing him off with some of the offseason moves that the Lakers made, obviously getting rid of Lamar Odom. That everybody thought that was a very key portion of that team. And they were, in a way, writing the Lakers off, as they would still make the playoffs, but they weren't going to make a run. But I think with how Kobe's done this year, with his points, and then just how I know his stats may have gone down a little bit from usual.
Yeah.
But he's had to be, especially his shooting percentage has gone down. But he's had to shoot more, and he's not that quick player that he used to be. So he's not going to be able to get a split and go by people and get that dunk or that layup. He's going to have to pull up every night, a lot more.
He's adjusted his game and his
exactly,
age.
And I think that's what's allowed him to still be in this MVP race.
Right, and he's led the Lakers to such a good record this year in the NBA. I think a pretty much a better record than most would expect. But I think you can kind of contribute that to the good play of Gasol and Bynum, especially later now in the season. But he's still leading the NBA in points per game, and he's kind of coming back a little bit to the old Kobe. And you're kind of getting to see kind of like how Michael adjusted his game later in his career. You're starting to see that with Kobe Bryant. And the great players can extend their careers, can pick up another element to their game and continue having great careers. And you're seeing that with Kobe. And one thing with Kobe is he only has 1 MVP to his credit. And if you think about how great of a player he is in NBA history, to only have 1 MVP is pretty surprising to me. Who's your dark horse so far?
My dark horse would be Kevin Love, just because other than LeBron James, and maybe even more so than LeBron James, his stats are just eye-popping. Of course, what's holding him back is he doesn't play on an elite team. But he's scoring 26 points per game and has 13.5 rebounds per game. And rebounding in the NBA, and this is one of my problems with the NBA, while I'm a college basketball fan, rebounding is jumping in the NBA.
Right.
And Kevin Love has shown what a player can still do boxing out, going back to kind of like the Dennis Rodman, Charles Barkley days, which huge rebound stats. And so Kevin Love is really kind of not redefined, but went a little back into the past to redefine the power forward position. And so I really like Kevin Love as a dark horse candidate just because his stats are so eye-popping.
Right, he's kind of got that old man game.
Right.
Like you said, he's
He's a
smart
bull.
with how he does it. Right, and he's aggressive, and
Right.
he hustles, and he gets after those loose balls. That's how he picks up a lot of his rebounds. But, yeah, he's just dominating on the glass. And if you look at how he's done in the last month, he's averaged 31 points per game in this last month. I think that's the best in the NBA. I think it's probably the best individual month by a player in the NBA. So Kevin Love has definitely turned it on, especially late in the NBA season, which can really help his push. But in the end, like you said, I think his team record is a little bit too weak for you to give it to Kevin Love. With that, who's under the radar right now? Who's played surprisingly well? You don't think they're necessarily going to win the MVP, but they're worth giving a mention or consideration to.
Mine is the Boston Celtics point guard Rajon Rondo. He averages 12.4 points a game, and that I think is his only real downfall. You're not going to win the MVP in the NBA, which looks a lot at scoring, unless you are scoring over 20 points a game. But he's averaging 11 assists. That's second in the NBA behind Steve Nash. So no real surprise with that, because we all know how Steve Nash is. Steve Nash and Rajon Rondo are two almost very similar players. And he gets almost 5 rebounds a game. For a point guard, especially of his size, I know if it was a big man, 5 wouldn't be that impressive. But because he is a point guard.
He's a point guard and he's a 6'1" point guard.
Exactly.
To be getting 5 rebounds a game is pretty impressive, especially playing back on the perimeter most of the time in a game.
And if you it can be argued, if you take him off of the floor this whole season from the Celtics, you could say they've got a losing record, and they're not even in the playoffs. Right now they sit at 4th.
Right.
So that's a huge turnaround, and I think that without him, the Celtics are struggling.
Well, one thing that I love about Rajon's game that's a little bit, you don't really see it with stats, but you take a look at last year's NBA Finals. I referred to this in an earlier show, but when he hurt his elbow and still came back and played without it and wanted to guard LeBron James, and you see him getting up in LeBron James's face in this, in these playoff games and almost trash talking a little bit. Rajon brings that to the NBA that you don't really see in a lot of players. It's kind of like that it factor, that leadership role that really drives the Celtics. And I agree with you in the fact that if they don't have him, they're a totally different team. And it's crazy to me that they think that the Celtics have thought about possibly trading him, and then he had that crazy game where he went nuts and dropped a ton of which game I'm talking about. He dropped a ton of assists and played extremely well, and that kind of stopped the talk. Who else do you think? Well, who's your under the radar player?
Well, first of all, I want to say that the Rajon Rondo Steve Nash comparison is way off base.
I agree with you on that a little bit.
Steve Nash is an excellent shooter.
Right.
Scored way more points than Rajon.
A
way more apt comparison would be Jason Kidd Rajon. For what they do, they do it in different ways, but what
Right.
they do for their teams is way more comparable
Yeah,
to Steve
Nash
Nash.
is so-
But I'm saying if you take away maybe the shooting aspect, because Steve Nash
As a
is-
leader,
that,
possibly.
Because I was talking with their assist totals and how they control their teams. You look at Steve Nash and Rajon Rondo, they own their teams. They have their whole career. Once Rajon got in and was able to show what he could do, he's been that guy. And
Right.
Steve Nash, as we know, has always been that guy for his team. That's what I mean. I understand. I do agree.
The shooting's totally different.
And staying
yes.
with the point guard thing, my under the radar player is Tony Parker. We can all agree that Rajon Rondo, without Rajon Rondo, the Celtics would have just plummeted in the stats. They would probably not even be in consideration for a playoff team. We'd be talking about where they're going to go in the lottery.
Right.
But also, Tony Parker for the Spurs, with Manu Ginobili missing a large part of the season, the Spurs have really relied on Tony Parker. He's averaging about 19 points per game and 8 assists. That's as good a numbers as there are in the league for a point guard, really. And without him, the Spurs would probably be a little better off than the Celtics are without Rondo, but they would be, instead of fighting for first, they'd be fighting for 8th. So I think Tony Parker's my under-the-radar player.
Okay, I can agree with that. I think Tony Parker means a lot to the Spurs, like you said. I think without Tony Parker, the Spurs are a totally different team this year. He's kind of been the driving force behind them, similar to Rondo with the Celtics.
And one thing with almost all of the guys we've mentioned in this MVP talk, if you look at all of them, they all have, as you said, that it factor, that drive to win. Kevin Love's not the most talented player in the NBA.
Probably not in the upper half.
No, but what he does do is he hustles, and it's the same with Rajon. I would even argue it's the same with LeBron. Yeah, LeBron's a great scorer, great player all around, but LeBron hustles. If you watch him, he's getting back on defense. He's pushing the fast break, and that builds into his scoring totals and assist totals and those stats that everybody looks at. But all of these guys that we've talked about have that drive to win, and they're not going to let anybody stop them, and that is what you have to be an MVP, I think.
Okay. Well, with that, we got Masters Week. This is it. Tiger Woods just came off his win at the Arnold Palmer Invitational last week. Is he your favorite to win the Masters this week, or how well do you see him doing? How you see Tiger Woods playing this week?
I'm going to say he wins. And half of that is I do think he can win, and I think that last win he got will give him now that confidence that he's been searching for such a long time since he came back to finally go on and win. Is he a huge favorite? I'm going to say no, because there's other guys in professional golf that you cannot take anything away from. Phil Mickelson, the rest of those guys, they could very easily take it. There's not a guy in there that could do it, but Tiger's definitely my favorite.
How do you feel?
I think Tiger will be in contention. I think he'll be in the top 10. But more so than that, golf needs Tiger to be in contention at the cut, which he struggled to make the cut. He has to make the cut.
Right.
Our golf will survive without Tiger, but golf will not be popular without Tiger.
Right.
You see Phil Mickelson, but tell me who the number one golf player in the world is right now.
Rory McIlroy.
All right, well, you're a little more than above average sports fan. Just proved my point there a little bit, but most people aren't going to recognize someone other than Tiger from golf. Just you're a casual fan. Nobody's going to turn it on, and if anybody's swinging a golf club other than Tiger, most casual sports fans will flip the channel. So they need him to be in contention, and if he's in contention after the third round, the Masters viewing will go way up.
Right.
But they really need Tiger to be in contention. Golf needs Tiger to win more than Tiger needs to win, and I think he'll give a good showing and be in the top 10.
Okay. Well, I think Tiger needs to win. I don't know if he needs to win this one, but he definitely has to pick up a major this year, especially if he's going to try and catch up to Jack Nicklaus's record or break it. He's at 14 right now. He's got to get to 19. That's still his ultimate goal. I'd love to see a showdown with Rory McIlroy, and it kind of go into extra holes into a playoff. But
it'll be a success if Tiger gets to 16 majors.
I'd like to see. I think he breaks the top 10 this week at 16 majors. That sounds like a good number because he has struggled playing in the last few years. He might pick it up. We'll have to wait and see. That's it for the Peanut Gallery for this week. Hope you enjoyed it, and we'll see y'all next week.